Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the Insurance AI Governance Without Handbrakes webinar, Enabling Innovation While Managing Real Risk with Mike Morrison, CISO. And so we have Alex Paris. Alex is the CEO and founder of Lakeside Consulting Group. Lakeside Consulting provides technology solutions for the insurance industry, specifically insurance brokers, P&C, health, et cetera. And Mike Morrison is a chief information security officer with more than 20 years experience in governance and in security. And we have a very, very dynamic and very interesting session today. Alex, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words before we get started with our agenda for the day.
No, I welcome everybody who's been able to join the podcast or is going to be listening in later after this. You're going to learn a lot. Mike has got more than a lifetime's worth of knowledge about current and past issues around cybersecurity, especially now with AI at the forefront. We're going to get, up to current date, knowledge of the environment and where we need to start, putting guardrails on for operations, especially if you're planning to scale and grow.
All right, perfect. So why don't we just get started with the podcast style webinar that we have. So, setting the stage, looking at the risk landscape, Mike, what are the biggest risks the AI tools are introducing into insurance brokerages and data heavy organizations right now?
Right. So I think, some of the biggest risks, kind of stem from how AI is being utilized, being brought into the organization. So across many different industries, it looks a little bit different. But, employees are going out and seeking AI tools on their own. Companies are bringing AI tools and maybe not grasping the full breadth and depth of the access that the tools are granted within their environment. So that can introduce risk of exposing too much of your company data to the tool. There's not a lot of oversight on the use of AI tools within companies. And so, you don't really know what's coming and going as far as data or how people are using the tools or how, what they're doing with the output. And so in the insurance industry, we rely on these tools to give us answers about, whatever the task is at hand. And so for decades, we've relied on these computers that have been programmed to give us, answers with integrity. What you put in, you get out the same thing every time. And with AI, there's a lot of variability to it. There's a back end that's, looking at data and deriving the answer that it thinks is appropriate. And we don't always see, kind of behind the curtain to how decisions are being made by the tools. So, trusting the data that comes out of these AI tools, could potentially lead to someone or a process making decisions that have bias, that they could be based on protected characteristics like race or sex or age or disability. So insurance companies, themselves can be exposed to liability through decisions that are made by these AI tools in a way that we hadn't really seen with computers before. So I always like to say it like this, for years we've trusted these computers that come back with the same answer time and time again. And now AI can act more like an employee, just another employee who can make mistakes. And so we'll be talking about, a lot of things, but, really the challenge is what kind of governance do you need to put around all of this so that you not only speed up your organization by allowing it to utilize tools like this, but also use the tools carefully, ensure that the output aligns with your mission, and that you're not exposing yourself to greater liability through the use of these tools.
Yeah, Mike, I mean, that's a great couple of examples. I mean, just recently, I think we all saw about 3-4 weeks ago, Anthology desktop app is reading Windows BIOS code and sending back to them for consumption. It's so immediately your vulnerabilities, even in ways that you didn't even know existed, and Anthology didn't even kind of know that they were doing that as well. It was kind of one of those when the press came back and asked them, they were kind of mum on that subject originally, and then they were like, well, it doesn't get consumed by anybody else. Yes, we get it, but I mean, it just turned into that, like, why are you even taking that to begin with? Going back to some other pieces, great examples of clients I've had where the broker or the producer is taking grok. I just want it to write a better email for me, but they're dumping PII into the body of the email to have grok write it a better email. It's like some of these things, like good intentions have sometimes unintended consequences, which
Right.
we've had to sit and go kind of no, stop, don't, or yes, but please proceed this way. Don't do it this way.
Right. And I mean, these tools, even the developers, they believe that they've built in guardrails to these tools and they believe that they'll be effective when the tool's deployed. And I have, there's so many examples. I mean, open the news tab every day, and there's a new article about how AI, basically introduced too much risk into an organization. There was one where a AI tool was being used. I'll try not to name names, but I think it was Claude, but when we get to the company names, a lot of these are still allegations. So of course, we'll let the courts do their thing. But, I believe it was Claude. They were using the tool to do development. I think it was within an AWS environment. And, Claude should have had guardrails not to delete, to have widespread ability to delete data. But, as a part of Claude troubleshooting its own code, it decided it was a good idea to delete an entire volume where the code reside. And, that also included all of the data and all of the backups for the entire startup company. They weren't doing backups. They had no way to recover. And so even,
Yeah.
and then the best thing about that article was that the developers asked Claude after the event happened, they said, well, why did you do that? And it said, I don't know. I ignored every guardrail that's put in place. And so, a little worrisome that sometimes these guardrails can fail. It's really, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, it's really important to have, complete oversight over these tools, and that's not easy. But, a good start, to your point, Alex, is, don't default to wide open, basically, only allow these tools to have access to what they need, from
Well,
the data access perspective.
it's just proper plan build. I mean, what we do with all our clients, first thing is we ring fence, what do you want it to touch
Hmm.
first? This is the first parts of, what we'll go into eventually is the governance process, but you got to ring fence the data. Again, these are large language models and they're pointed out, most of these are default pointed out to the internet, not to what you want it to read off of or talk to. And even then, to your point, Claude, I saw that same article, Claude overrode everything. And it's like, well, let's give it a canned environment pointed at that and say, you can't, all right, you can blow this sandbox up as much as you want. It's not going to ever touch my true production environment until I'm good and ready.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and a lot of the failures in the AI world are just the same failures that IT has experienced for many years. It's a lack of preparation.
It's that classic tire swing cartoon from coding horror, right? And I
Mhm.
tell clients to say, you know why this is still valid 25 years later? Human
Right.
nature hasn't changed in millennia. So
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's just us making the same mistakes, repeating history. It's like nothing new. To your point, nothing new. We just have to, it's just proper project management and proper, governance process before you start.
Right. And
And
then, oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, I was, yeah, you go ahead because I got a question. Uh,
Okay.
Fine
Yeah.
with that.
Well, I was going to say, on the other side of things, like we have the data access issue, but then we have the output issue as well, where, we're trusting output, making decisions, and like there's a huge healthcare company that's being sued right now. And they had an AI model that was making insurance decisions. And when they analyze, after the lawsuit appeared and they did the analysis on the output and the decisions made, they found that the tool was giving them a 90% error rate on denying or cutting short medically necessary care for elder patients. And so, the patients were being discharged early, forced to pay out of pocket, all these things. And so, it's not only that, this output is making decisions that a human wouldn't, or that the company wouldn't, or it's not within their parameters, but potentially causing real harm, by just trusting the output of this. These people maybe didn't receive the care they needed, all the stress that's induced from having to pay a bill that should have been covered by insurance. All these things we really have to be careful, not only to protect our businesses, but to not cause harm to people, to use AI responsibly, essentially.
Yeah, and what we do with our, when we do our setups too, this is going back to that same thing. It's like we know AI hallucinates. You go to any of the hackathon, uh, we've gotten AI to say, you can go 17 a prime number. And for 26 times in a row, you can go and say, it'll say yes.
Hmm.
But after that 27th time, it's like AI can get gaslit. It can go, well, maybe he's trying to tell me it's not. And it'll make that jump presumption. And that goes back to some of the, going into some of the later discussion we'll have on this, Mike. It's like a lot of AI is being based now on, I mean, we're seeing it too. It's like token hits on the API. I mean, OpenAI for the the pay version, there it's a nickel a pop. Well, that starts to add up, and we'll go into, is that just the teaser right now, or is that going to be? And this is where, as part of, you're testing your protocol, you need to start asking questions to your subject matter experts, which we do whenever we start setting stuff up with brokerages. Is this a constant in your universe? Is this question only need to be answered once? Is it as mutable as gravity? Because if that answer is yes, then you tell AI, answer that question once, store it, and never ask it again. Never, because it's not going to change.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's so many angles to the risks with AI tool. Not that they're not great tools. I use
Right.
AI frequently and all that. But yeah, the long-term use, as these companies who produce the AI tools realize that their costs are adding up to, are we going to see a model like we've seen with, many tech startups where, the first taste is free, and then after that, we're going to see increasing rates to maybe where it doesn't outweigh the positives. Maybe you're better off having humans in some roles and using AI more sparingly, from an organizational perspective. So it'll be interesting, to see how the next couple of years operate, or, how the companies operate under those kinds of pressures. The other thing is all these startups that are coming along with AI tools, are they going to be able to afford, the cost of tokens and things like that? And what's that going to mean for their longevity? And if you're building all your processes around a tool that's maybe in startup mode, will it be around in 2 or 3 years? Will they be able to, weather that storm basically? So, there's
Yeah.
a lot of different angles to think about.
And what's, bringing up the fact a lot of these AIs are startups, right? Now we're starting to see the big players this year going to IPO. We
Yep.
all know what happens once you start becoming your investors expect this for your
Hmm.
profit curve.
Hey, so
Exactly.
so I wanted to get into something that was very specifically for insurance risk. You mentioned about the people getting denied coverage or getting discharged earlier, et cetera. How is the insurance industry uniquely exposed to AI risk? And I know in the past you talked about AI bias and discrimination, right? So if you could kind of talk to that topic a little bit.
Right. So, AI tools, when you're, coming up with the, cost of premiums, things like that. Of course, you want to apply, um, maybe you include risk factors like the home, or, the property is in a a place that is at high risk of fire or earthquakes or floods, that type of thing. Of course, those are all characteristics that you can use to determine price. But in the background, these tools can potentially key off of, if a client fills out an application, the tools could analyze the way they write and determine the person is most likely a specific gender or race or age. And it could start making determinations based on that, not necessarily just a checkbox like I am male, I'm female, this is my date of birth, that type of thing. But it also can derive these kinds of things from other information, other inputs. And, and that's what makes it really difficult to, analyze how a determination was made by an AI tool. Really, and of course that can expose the insurance company to liability. If over time we see that discrimination is occurring, like, I said, there's a 90% error rate with the one AI tool. If we're seeing that broad of an error with a tool, certainly, insurance companies are going to face, lawsuits and loss of clients, loss of reputation, all the things that go along with that kind of hit.
Yeah, and we do, again, to Mike's point, this is one, again, that goes back to making sure your AI is built properly to start, not making those inferences. You can, the best part of, you can tell an AI model, only do this, only do that, set defaults to just, you can test that and lock those in. That's the good news about the tools. They are, aside from our, our previous, smoke alarm about, Claude deleting off that startup. Yeah, that's what happens when you give it free reign. If you start limiting the tool to not free reign, it does stay in line. We have
Right.
noticed, we have forced that. You can, and again, it goes back to when you do it's proper build and proper consultation with your subject matter experts. What do you not want it to do? What do you not want it to see? And it's just having a solid classic project management testing protocol. All right, did you test for this? How did you secure that method? How did you get to that? How, again, you can have a model. It's almost like building a Python code library. It's, you build the program and you make sure, you set the rules prior to engaging with it, and you just tell it not to do that or ask that question again. If it's something that's as immutable as gravity, it's like, well, only ask that question once and refer that answer every time. Because that's the one thing nice about AI. If you tell it asked and answered, that's it. If you say only reference this table with under these auspices, it will come back and give you accurate results. I mean, this is one of these things with the models we're using for pricing by NACS code, right? As long as if you got a body shop somewhere and all of a sudden construction costs went up and all your peers went to $5 million of coverage at 3, well, you can get a rating model that will go back, pull that information, and inform your client that, hey, this just happened. What do you want to do?
Yeah. Well, and there's also another angle to this. We've been talking all about the tools that we know are in the organization and that have been intentionally implemented within within the organization. And the other thing that's going on is people find shortcuts to do their work. They find a tool they think is great. They
Oh
go
yeah.
out and use it without the organization even knowing. And so you kind of have this proliferation of tools throughout your organization that you don't even know about. And, with more and more people on their personal devices, potentially using their personal devices and, for work purposes, essentially, it's a real problem, and years ago we had a similar issue with, people preferred this program instead of this one. And I don't like Microsoft, so I use this tool. I don't like the Adobe, so I use this tool, just
Yeah.
as an example. And so we had this, thing called shadow IT that basically popped up, people going off and doing whatever they wanted. And that we had to rein that in, policies that say these are the organizationally approved tools and this is all you can use, and training and repercussions and all the fun stuff. And we're having the same thing with shadow AI. Everybody wants the shiny new toy. Everybody has
Yeah.
a religion around which AI tool is the best, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, and then the millions of other, tools that are popping up. They all think one thing can do something better, and they may be right. But we do have this risk of shadow AI emerging, and getting your arms around that is something we'll talk about today. What
Yeah, I mean,
strategies.
it's classic just organizational operations stuff where you just have to go at a certain day. It's like, yeah, you can't, don't, please don't dump don't, it's I like to say it's common sense, but that's presuming common sense is common if everyone had it. But it's like, don't dump the person's social security number into the AI tool because you wanted to write a better email for you. Just tell the AI tool leave that part, just say, hey, leave a blank space for me to fill in this piece later. You and it will do it. It will come back and go leave you here, insert. You'll literally go insert social security number here, insert policy number here. You can and it will. You don't have to ever put that information in to begin with. You just instruct it. Yeah, I need a space for this. I need a space for that.
Right. Right. And I mean, everything we've talked about, um, all of this could be prevented. Everyone wants to move fast right now. And so, this discussion is, basically about, speeding along with AI without crashing is kind of the topic that I presented when we were thinking about doing this meeting. So yeah, you want to go fast, but you may not survive if you crash. These companies may not
Totally.
survive the crash that's coming from the liability. So the companies that are going to win are the ones who bring in technology carefully, put the right guardrails in place so that, there isn't a big crash. And, to do that, you do need to have approach that uses governance, and all of these AI frameworks and things like that are emerging. It doesn't mean you have to slam the brakes and say no implementation, but we'll talk about some approaches that you can take to
Yeah,
bring in technology carefully and make sure you're not making these mistakes that can land you in a lot of danger.
yeah. Could you walk us through some of those governance frameworks? Like was it NIST, ISO, FAST, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So Uh, National Institute for Science and Technology in the United States, they produced the NIST AI risk management framework. And so it can really help organizations, map and measure and manage AI risk and build kind of a repeatable governance process around bringing tools into the organization. I'll kind of group all these together and talk about what they do. But in total, these frameworks can help you do some risk prioritization, establish a risk threshold, and then only do in-depth risk analysis of the tools that cause your or would cause your company the most exposure to liability from the use of AI tools. And so, meaning if somebody goes out and is using an AI tool with only public information, it's only getting information out from the internet, and there's no real chance to introduce sensitive company data, that's going to be lower priority versus a tool that maybe has access to all of your client data and is using it to enable you to make faster decisions or to propagate your CRM tool or whatever tool you have in use. Those are going to be much, much higher, ranked in your risk priority, and you'll want to spend more time on that. So there's the AI risk management framework that helps kind of, establish that program. ISO also has a standard, the 42001 standard from the International Standards Organization. And really, that's a formal management system. Just like if you've ever worked with ISO, everything is a management system for information systems. You have one, and just like the information systems ISMS one, you have the AI management system AIMS, and it integrates with ISO 27000. It's more about formalization of the controls around implementing AI. So then there's other frameworks emerging right now, like the AI UC1. It's It was created by an insurance underwriter group, and they have a different acronym for the actual AIUC, but it's AI, I think use case tiering or something like that is AIUC. But AIUC 1, if you're familiar with the SOC world and AICPA accounting world, AIUC 1 is very similar to the SOC 2. What they've done with this standard is they've taken input from NIST, RMF, and the ISO and the European AI laws, and really they've just taken inputs from all the different frameworks out there and developed a framework that's for users and developers of AI, and have created a SOC 2 type certification program. There's a few auditors out there that can issue that certification now. And then finally, just one more framework I wanted to talk about is the AARM. It's the Autonomous Action Runtime Management Framework. And it's really about developing AI tools so that you can apply the kinds of controls that Alex have been talking about, so that you can control the input and output. You can monitor the input and output, and you can just enforce safe behavior in general within the tool. So lots of different acronyms coming out, new acronyms. We love those come out all the time in IT world, and I think they all can be used to mature the governance within an organization.
It really just always goes back to audit trail, and that's always part of any good governance process, Fernando. Just on top of the standards, it's maintaining industry best practices. Do you want to leave your environment cleaner than when you started something, right? So it's good hygiene, good audit trail to force those guardrails in, force look backs to make sure it's still performing the way you want, the model's still performing the way you want it to perform. And because what I always tell any client that gets involved with us at Lakeside is when you start this project or you start this process, you're also agreeing to a continuous improvement process. It might not be with us. We'll always happily re-engage with you at any time, but it's you're gonna get through. You're gonna start this and build. You're gonna get through it, and then 6 months later, you're gonna go, yeah, it's great. I want to start doing this now too, because it'll give you part of the, when we do this continuous brokerage model, it's going to give you hours back of your day to start handling bigger issues and tackle more things, and frankly, just give you the time to start thinking about where you want to go next.
Right.
Okay. Oh, Rich says he has a conflict at 1:30. Yep, we'll be sending out to everybody the recording of this webinar. So appreciate
Great.
it. So so a little bit about considerations for HIPAA, so we talked about the frameworks, we talked about healthcare earlier. What about special considerations for the new HIPAA standard, and why does this matter, or how does this impact insurance AI governance?
Well,
right.
HIPAA's
yeah, good.
HIPAA's great. It's in the healthcare, right? It's your patient privacy laws, right? And it's been long overdue for a refresh. And Mike and I have been talking about that, where it's like right now it's still a little nascent on AI, but it's going to get updated probably pretty soon here. AI is going to have to be part of that conversation with HIPAA as well, because what's going out, again, it goes back to what's going out back into the models, right? And it goes back to some of those standards, like when you contract with these AI companies, by default, that information goes back to them. And they will always say it's for internal research only. Well, how are they protecting it? So
right.
One of the first things that we try to make sure is when if you have that contract there already, does it just say for your use only? Or did you give them the carte blanche to take that information back?
Yeah, it's those, for the data sharing, it's those business associates agreements where you define what data is allowed to be transferred back and forth. you start to lose a little bit of control with AI if you don't limit what access the AI tool might have access to. And so, is that covered by your BAA? If it's if there is a breach, whose fault is it? Is it, yours because you lost the data? Is it the tools because it collected the data when it, wasn't within the parameters? And, we're AI is so integrated into healthcare. Every EMR tool out there is integrating it. This is another one where shadow IT is emerging. The doctors are, rightfully a lot of times in charge of their practice. They're going to do what they want. They're going to implement what they want. They're going to bring in the AI note taker that has ambient listening, that listens to the patient's talk. Some of the issues we're seeing with that are that AI is good at note taking, but not necessarily great at knowing who's talking when. And so it's really important, to have that human oversight. Like I talked to my doctor, I just went in and he gave me an AI notice. I use an AI note taker, and I said, "Oh, that's great. I'm fine with it. I love AI and everything that's emerging, but I do want to, say like." Right after my meeting with you, I'd like you to transcribe my notes so you know that it was the conversation between me and you, and it's not your 2 or 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. call getting mixed up with my records. I have actually seen a diagnosis on my chart within the past year where I know the notes said that I specifically did not have something and it showed up in my chart. And so I went back to the doctor and, I don't know if it's AR or not, but, I think all of us, for a while should be a little bit more careful with our records.
Yeah.
So anyway, that can impact insurance, of course, because, this could bring up malpractice or, liabilities. So these liabilities to these health insurance companies, where we're just trusting those AI outputs could put you in a worse place.
Exactly. Data tools have been a big part of the new HIPAA update, and how that data tool interacts, how you interact in getting into the big thing, multi-factor authentication.
Mhm.
That's a big one coming in. So how are we going to do multi-factor and authentication with some of these tools? That's going to be an interesting piece of discussion.
Right, right. So we're expecting those HIPAA updates this month sometime. The short month is just getting shorter and shorter. I check every day to see if the government will get it out before the end of the month, but it should be out this month, if not, within the next month or so.
So we're waiting for bated breath with bated breath for this.
Right.
We're waiting for, yeah, I mean, we're in the public comment period is ended. I mean, we're waiting for final rule to be published. So
Yeah, it's been through all of that, and I've learned time and again with like NIST and other government regulations that don't plan until the real text comes out. I remember it was like NIST 800-171 or something. They went through all the public comment, and at the very end, they decided to like realign with NIST 853 and sections that only had a couple of lines of requirements, ballooned up to like 20, 30 requirements. And so we weren't ready for all of that. And we'd been planning ahead. And so, yeah, it's better just to wait for the official guidance from the government. But that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean you can't put a robust, mature governance, program in place just to do the right thing, right? You want to be ahead of the curve and that type of thing. But yeah, I expect a lot of changes, like Alex was saying, with the HIPAA regulation with regards to AI. I think maybe even this revision, maybe a little bit behind. This stuff is moving so fast, so I'd expect more guidance to come within the next year or two.
Okay.
yeah,
Hey, so I wanted to pivot to Alex. I'm sorry if I cut you off there.
no, go ahead.
Okay. So, this session is about governance. And so what I wanted to do is kind of get into the meat of the topic, which is what does a responsible governance program look like? Like, where do you start? Is it with inventories first? Is there if you could walk us through how that looks like? I think there's something about tiered risk assessment
Yeah.
approach. So if you could run us through a
Right.
responsible governance project.
Yeah, I mean, the first step in almost every framework I've looked at, including like guidance directly from Department of Health and Human Services and that type of thing, is, since we're on the healthcare topic. But really all of the frameworks across the board start with inventory. You don't really know, what you have until you look. And then finding out what you have is also difficult. Yeah, you're going to know. You can go back to your contracts and see who you've bought a specific AI tool from. But do you know all the tools that you already have in place that have introduced AI as part of a process? Were you notified of that? Probably not. They probably just introduced it. So really revisiting almost every, contract and tool that you have in place, seeing what kind of AI use case there is, seeing if there's overlap, that type of thing. And then also, getting a handle on your shadow AI implementations. And so, every employee potentially is going out and using an AI tool on their own. How do you track that down? It's a difficult problem. You can ask them. Maybe they'll tell you. Maybe they won't. Maybe they're paying for the license and you're using it legally. Maybe they're not. So you do have to check with your users and find out if AI tools are in place. One of the most effective ways I've seen to identify AI use is by using an MSSP who's already keyed, who's already receiving all of my logs from my, network devices and things like that within the company, all the systems maybe. And you can actually get a view of what URLs, what websites clients are hitting, where data is going. And a lot of the MSSPs now can just produce a AI report for you that says, hey, you've got 2,000 users hitting Gemini, you've got, 150, or so using Claude or whatever, and not just to limit to the big names, but, it can really tell you all the different tools that are in use. And then you have to kind of backtrack. Okay, who's using this? All right, let's go ask them why. What's their use case? Let's get it in our inventory. And then once you know what you have, I mean, there's two directions you need to go. One is, okay, you're using it. Are we using it securely? Have we implemented it properly? Is there something we can do to secure the data right now? Because backtracking in AI is difficult. It's Pandora's box. You take the lid off and you allow all of the access to all of your data. You can't put that back in necessarily. Once the learning model has a grasp of it, it might,
We call it inviting the vampire in.
yeah,
You
exactly.
once you bring the vampire in, you can't get him to you can't say he's no longer welcome.
Right, right. So from the start, if possible, that'd be ideal. But we all know how it works in the IT world. You always find out, almost always find out
We
after
find
the
out
fact.
six, you find out 8 months later, oh yeah. And
Right,
you usually find out because something breached.
right,
And now
right.
you're like, uh-oh.
Yeah. So, secure the AI prompts, put whatever tools you have in place around, data loss prevention and things like that. And these tools are rapidly emerging right now in the AI space. How do we put kind of a web application type firewall where we can see all inputs and outputs and make sure it meets the parameters that we want to meet, and make sure that the wrong data isn't going in, the wrong data isn't coming out and potentially being shared outside the organization. Yeah, I was just out at RSAC in San Francisco, and all of these tools are promising to do that well. I have a lot of work to find out which ones actually do it well. But that's what we need to do to secure the data right now. The other thing is to do these risk assessments, to evaluate each of these implementations and look at the use cases and, ask a lot of questions, what need does this meet? Is it even necessary in our organization? Is it solving a problem? What kind of benefits can we expect from this tool? Um, how is it being developed, or is this something that our developers are running with, or are we trusting another organization to do it? Does it have access to PII? Just there's a million questions like that. There's a framework, actually, a risk case assessment framework from the Department of Homeland Security. They give out several free different Excel workbooks that you can use if you don't already have a risk assessment program. And I find them to be a pretty good guide, a good start. They're very developed for the federal government. And, they even talk about like weapons and things like that, which is a whole nother podcast about AI and automated weaponry. But in any
We
case,
will
they
we won't go into that today, but it'll definitely be, yeah, don't have AI select your target packages.
right.
But when you engage with us at Lakeside, I tell you agree to a governance process with any engagement with us, especially around AI, just for that reason alone, because you need to have and with that project management, we always do a RACI. So responsible, assigned, informed, consents, the classic project management of that. What it does is it keeps everybody honest and in the loop. So you may not have a say at the table, but you'll find out what the conversation was.
Yeah. And
Right.
that I think that was such an important part of your process, Alex, that you made sure to include a chapter of that in your upcoming book that you're writing, right?
Yeah.
So
And we
yeah,
talk about, we're going to talk about shadow, stuff too, part of working with clients. I've sat on at one point in 1 year 32 different vendor engagements because the brokers offices, each office was run separately. And people were bringing in tools that the core IT group didn't know about. We were like, what? You're doing what? And to Mike's point, you're like, you find out, it's like, oh yeah, that tool also caused, that tool has the potential to cause a massive breach here. We need to think about this really quickly before we let you, let you proceed. But kindly stop that today, or kindly don't include this when you're using that tool.
Right. Well, and the other thing you already kind of touched on this earlier is this isn't a one and done process by any means. I was just discussing with a client, a AI acceptable use agreement, and we were talking about the putting the approved tools in the agreement that was only going to get signed once a year. And it was just like, what's the point? Every single week we are modifying.
Every quarter you're getting a new tool.
Yeah, and so this isn't a one and done. It should be a continuous process. Yes, it takes time. Is it important? You betcha. Like, this
Yeah,
could be
that agreement doesn't turn into put the tools in. It turns into, did you consult with IT before you brought the tool into the environment?
right, right. And then over time, capabilities of AI tools are going to change. You might have an AI tool that performed one function. The next year it performs 100, and you've got redundancy, or you're
You're
yeah,
in a new we're in a new web environment.
yeah,
Companies come, as we saw, I've seen now 3 times in my life with each web, with each you'll have a bunch of startups. You're going to be using their tool. They disappear to the next week, and
right,
you're going to be finding its replacement, or they're consolidating. I mean, we're in the growth phase.
yeah.
Everybody's out getting new products to market. There will be a consolidation. And to your point, when does that happen? You don't know yet. We will it's going to be a while, but it will happen. And at that point, your policy has to be just as flexible as the market conditions will bear.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then
so
also as a CISO, sorry, I want to be cognizant of cost. And over time, of course, everybody wants the new toy, and then they use it for a couple of months, and then it kind of falls off to the side, never to be touched again. So, not only doing risk analysis, but the use analysis. Does this tool continue to be used the next year? If not, why are we still paying the license?
Exactly.
Always monitoring and eliminating the ones you're not using,
And that's going to come,
consolidating.
and that's really going to start picking up in the world of AI again. We touched on it earlier. It's the token cost.
Yeah.
That token is not, it's not like the dollars in your wallet. It's more like company script. If company if company A goes out of business and you've got $1 million worth of script, that's not going over to the next company. This isn't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Marrying processes to a specific tool, and then the tool changes. What's going to be the cost of that in the
yeah.
future? So something you want to be aware of.
Hey, there was something I wanted to ask you, Mike. What about ring fencing? I mean, we're talking about all these new tools that are going to come in and leaving, et cetera. Like, how do you secure the technical side of things? Is ring fencing a solution?
Yeah, yeah. So, it's just like everybody has dealt with access management for years, or limiting what ports are available through a firewall. It's the same privilege, same principle as least privilege, just applied to data. And so, zero trust type principles, data level segmentation, only allowing tools access to certain data sets, whatever they're intended to access. But, I think the easiest way to state it is just least privilege access to data for any AI system. And, Yeah, I know, Alex, this is, something where I do rely on people who do data analytics and, who have inventories of the data and, how do we get control on that data? You can do things like data labeling, like M365 supports that, and you can limit access by data labels. But
We do a
I think,
lot. Several different ways we do it, but we always do it on the overarching, to your point, least privilege access. We call it need. I use it from the finance world. Need to know.
mhm,
What's the need to know basis on this? Who, what, when, where, how, why. Um, and it turns into that really, when you start adding that to your governance process, that really starts focusing the conversations on when you're doing development, doing tooling to, okay, this is never gonna, we needed to never touch this. We need to never touch that. We only need the process or the function to fill in these and produce this product.
yeah,
So we talk about this in the upcoming book as well. It's like we can have the AI tool write the email, do the warm lead, and still stay within all the compliance aspects, right? Because it really at the and because what you're going is you're using curated sources to what you're talking about, Mike. It's like I bring everything into what we call them. They've been called data lakes, data warehouses. The newest term from Databricks is the lake house. I just found that one out the last
right,
couple months, which is it's like but the point of the matter is you're kind of securing the process beforehand to make sure that whatever the product you generate only uses what you want it to use.
right,
Uh, and it doesn't deviate from that. Because where I come from, which is a finance background as well, I come from Wall Street where you had to have audit trail and everything.
right,
So, this is where I've talked about insurance world to some degree with compliance. The insurance world is still very much, they never had a 1929 moment to force a federal standard. Insurance is state by state, locality by locality. The big carriers basically are what I like to call mega regional banks in some kind of tacit comparison. Yeah, they're national, but really they're 50 different individual branches that, as long as they apply by the rules of the exchange in which of the state that they're operating in, or in some cases like New York, where there's a locality with New York and then there's New York State. Um, yeah, you can pretty much, as long as it's like, hey, I don't want to operate in California. Okay, well, I don't have to follow this standard either
right,
that California wants to enforce. Or that's pretty much, it's where I came from though, we had the SEC and FINRA. If you didn't jump through the hoop of fire to the standard I used with the way I'm prescribed you to use it, you're going to prison for 25 years.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you can lose the trust of investors. There's like a million different things that could,
That's just not, that's
yeah,
not, that's the first layer. Like, okay, you
right,
lost your money. Now you've lost your freedom. I'm taking you to prison for
right.
20, like, that's not, there's another level of, yeah, you need to do
Yeah,
it. And just knowing that's where I've come from, that's why we apply our principles this way because it's industry best practice. It just works. So why not just keep stay to the higher standard, even though the higher standard may not be applicable? Why? It just saves a lot more time and it keeps the discussion a lot tighter and a lot faster too once you start wanting to do future development. Because you will, to your point, to all of our points here, we're just at the tip of the spear right now. We haven't seen what the rest of I mean, we've already seen some really big gains just in the last few years. A great example, now is it we've already also seen some of the clawback as well with some of this. They originally everyone's going, oh, it's going to be a full job replacement. No, to your point earlier, Mike,
yeah,
it's like having a new employee. It's all you've done is just now made sure that employee sleeps, eats, and works for you 24/7, 365. But
right.
it still has the same, it doesn't get sick. Well, it kind of can get sick. because we've shown already it can go off the reservation.
Right.
But if you instruct it just like any other computer program or any other code you write to stay within the guardrails, it will stay within the guardrails.
Yeah, and I mean, like to close out the segmentation, data segmentation conversation, how over time do we observe that, it continues to only have access to the data it needs, nothing stopping a user to dumping a spreadsheet full information you don't want it to have into it. Um, AI is very good at taking inputs. I'm waiting for the undo button on an AI tool. I haven't seen one. I hear a lot of vendors say we're working on the undo button. But if you don't have an undo button, you better have logging. You better have oversight over what's coming in and out of this thing, so that if you do need to get the mop and go and do a cleanup, that you at least where it is, what you're looking for, and that'll get you a start on cleaning things up. For example, PCI regulations, credit card regulations, you may not want to have any credit card numbers go into your AI tool.
I think we lost for oh, we know. I think we're still recording. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, what happens then? How do you clean it up? It used to be a headache when credit card would get into email because they get into the backups, and you delete the email, you still have to go back to backups. Anyway, undo button, very messy in AI, and so even if you do all of the even if you do all of the microsegmentation of data over time, you've got to monitor it, maybe do some cleanup when
Yeah, I mean, how you goes back to kind of how you were talking about, we ring fence access, right? So users cannot just willy-nilly dump data in. They have to, you can force the model to go, yeah, I don't know what this is, or it's not properly formatted, so you're not allowed to put it in my environment.
Right.
Same thing, we can make it also depends on how you want the tool to operate, right? So we've set up models where it's an output. It's only an output, and it's based upon you making sure that you've inputted the data into the environment the way we want you to begin with. Did you put this all? It won't give you an output until it's in the AMS. Well, the AMS control, we already have, common features of, what you're allowed to put in your agency management system, name, socials, addresses, all those. Well, if you don't put all that information in, well, the AI model is not going to get that into the data lake, so therefore it's not going to give you an answer.
Right. Yes, creating those boundaries and making
So
sure
yeah, I mean, you start the boundaries from the start, right? Who is allowed to put stuff? Who is allowed to bypass the journey, right? It's then go straight to the destination.
right.
Well, those you make sure that's only your trusted admin users, right? Your trusted IT teams, your trusted developers. Everyone else is a consumer of the product. So no, you get the output only. I mean, that goes back to consent and informed on the RACI, right? Your consent is given at the end of the product, and you're informed of the product, but you're not responsible, and you're not advising, and you're not contributing.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is it reminds me, as a programmer many years ago, but the old input and output validation, and doing the checks on the data and making sure that the program only accepts what it's really supposed to. And so, yeah, responsible developers are going to do that. We see a lot of our security vulnerabilities out in the wild because developers didn't do that, and so things like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, now we have AI prompt injection that's similar, just basically, as a developer, always expect the unexpected, do all the checks, make sure the data has integrity that's coming in and out of the application.
And that's a big thing that we talk about with governance, right? It's another thing that's being forced as part of with, kind of going back to the HIPAA standard, right? It's going to force an integrity aspect and a curation aspect that frankly has been a long time coming. It's needed. And this goes back to kind of the book. I've seen brokerages where they've got each different branch ran their AMS slightly in a different shade of the Venn diagrams. So common stuff did overlap, but branch A operated with, we had 5 different points of commission.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're if you're a finance team trying to figure out how to reconcile all your accounts receivable and to pay out all your brokers, that
Right.
it just became a mess. It's like, okay, we'll go to A, go to B, go to C.
Right.
And if all of those were missing, then get a human in the loop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, guys,
Well,
so I have a closing question
yeah.
because we have really covered a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of territory here and we're at the top of the hour, but I wanted to ask, I think this is an important question. Why is governance not a handbrake, but guardrails?
Right. And I can answer that since it was my idea to do the guardrail topic here. It's kind of what we talked at the beginning. Companies that are moving too fast, who aren't putting the guardrails in, are starting to crash. Seeing high dollar lawsuits, potentially causing injury to humans, things we really don't desire. And those are the ones we're hearing about. We're not so much hearing about the startup that failed right out the gate and just ceased to be a company after that. So, if you move too fast and you implement these tools without any oversight, without putting any guardrails in place, you maybe risk the existence of your company or doing severe harm to the company or to even people. So, yeah, governance, may slow things down initially. Maybe you take pause, right? You purchase the tool, but before you implement it, you take care to implement it correctly, and then you're off to the races. Or you do an assessment of a tool and you decide there's too much sharing going on. Maybe they're sharing with third parties, or maybe they can't guarantee, the security of your data in some way. Maybe you make a decision not to use them, look at some of the alternatives. So, it is important to slow down. We have a lot of shiny new toys out there. Everybody wants to get one. And, just taking pause and making sure that the purchase is prudent, that the implementation is done correctly. Maybe we'll slow you down a little bit, for the first lap. But then you should be off to the races and much lower risk of crashing later.
And to touch on that, it cuts down on the shadow IT.
Yeah.
Because if you start making this a handbrake, all of a sudden it's just, again, it goes back to human nature. Employees will hide this from you. And then by the time it becomes a problem, it's too late.
Right.
Whereas if they feel that they're going to get, again, it goes back to the shiny new object. If they feel like they're going to get what they want, they'll be forthcoming and they'll give you what they want.
Right.
And they might not necessarily, they want this, but if you can offer them going, hey, we can actually do this in house already for you for a cheaper rate. Will you do it? Yeah.
Right. Right. Well, Fernando, we could keep going on forever, on these
I
topics.
know, I know, I
Alex and I
know.
get on the call and we'll go for hours like this all the time. So, I thank everybody who took the time to watch us today, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so, look, I'll speak for Alex right now. Thank you so much for joining us on this call. Um, Everybody knows how to get a hold of Alex. It's Lakeside Consulting Group LLC.com or Alex Paris with one R on LinkedIn. How can people get hold of you, Mike?
Mike at zendusgroup.com, or if you just go to the zendusgroup.com website, that's zendusgroup.com. There's a contact form there as well. So thanks, Fernando.
Yeah, thank you very
And
much. And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, thanks again, Mike, for joining us. And I'll tell everybody too, if you have questions about this or you guys want to call, reach out. I pick up the phone and we'll happily have a consultation. I mean, it's
Yeah.
part of any discussion, any engagement with us, it always starts with a level of what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to achieve? And if we can help you. So that's always an easy conversation. It's it's a 30-minute coffee conversation.
Perfect. Well, and then and by the way, why don't you give out your phone number too, Alex, so people can call you?
It's on my LinkedIn. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect, perfect. Let me see. On your LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's on the LinkedIn. We'll have it on the web. It's on the LinkedIn and the website. So again, just reach me through my website, lakesideconsultingllc.com. Again, through my LinkedIn, contact me for, and then I think again through the website, all website or LinkedIn, and then email alex.paris@Lakeside Consulting Group LLC.com.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. And we'll see each other at a next webinar. And pretty soon we'll be sharing information about an upcoming summit that we're organizing in August. Stay tuned for that. All right. See you
Thank
guys
you,
later.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.